vision that we have, it covers all areas of democracy and rule of law. We believe that it is in line with 9 priorities. We are mostly focused on anti-corruption measures, free and fair elections, and independence of the justice system when it comes to fulfillment of 9 priorities, because we clearly see those links which were provided in the November 8 report of the European Commission, and we clearly see how decisive those reforms are to conduct free and fair elections in the country. So if we are not able to protect elections, which was mentioned by Mr. Gaharia, there is no way we can implement those reforms and bring the country back on the right democratic tracks. As mentioned, our vision is covering all areas. It's covering democratic governance, justice system reform, anti-corruption reform, depoliticized professional public service, and human rights protection. Our approach is very simple. We have quite a systemic approach. We are very much focused on the fundamental and structural changes, and we don't think that procedural and secondary amendments will be in compliance, let me say so, with the 9 priorities. So if we don't have fundamental changes, if we don't have substantial reforms, then we can't bring Georgia back on the right democratic track. So this is the key line that we are trying to follow in each and every initiative. So our objective when we speak about those reforms, first of all, is to restore the constitutional system of governance, to ensure functional separation of powers, which is not the case, unfortunately, today, to ensure independence of the justice system, to ensure effectiveness of the state institutions. So all the problems that we currently have, to address those problems, eradicate political and elite corruption, which is one of our key priorities, which we are currently working on. Ensure functional protection of human rights, not just ensure protection of human rights on the paper, but in the practice, and ensure free, fair, and competitive elections. Let me start with the justice system, because I know it's the top priority number 1. Our approach here is all-inclusive. I would say we don't think that the reform of the justice system only should apply to the judiciary. It should apply to the entire judicial chain. So we have initiatives on the police, on the investigative agencies, on the prosecutor's office, on the independent investigative mechanisms, on the criminal justice policy, parliamentary oversight, and the court. So we are covering almost everything. You don't see penitentiary here. It stands for us separately, and we're going to elaborate on this later. So let's start within this chain. So big idea when it comes to police, and we intend to continue those reforms that was started under Mr. Gaharia's leadership in the Ministry of Internal Affairs in 2018. It's an independent police concept. So we think that head of the police should be a non-political figure. It should be independent from the Ministry of Internal Affairs and elected by the Parliament based on the political consensus. That, I would say, is a big idea when it comes to reform of the police. We are covering also effective investigation separately from the police, and here we have a list of initiatives, couple of which we have already implemented when we were in the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It's separation of investigative, operative, and district directions. It's introduction of the community policing throughout the country. It's separation of investigative and prosecutorial functions, which is key. There are 2 drafts in the Parliament, one presented by us, another one presented by the government. Unfortunately, the last one is not in compliance, I would say, with the spirit of the reform and with the Venice Commission recommendations, and we hope it will come closer to those recommendations. Continuous implementation of human rights-oriented approach. You know, we have introduced Human Rights Protection Department in the police, so in the future we think that such kind of department in charge of monitoring the quality and in charge of protecting the human rights should be introduced in each and every investigative agency. That will be our top priority. Specialization on the juvenile crimes, on domestic violence, violence against women, and anti-discrimination issues in entire judicial chain. We think it's important to have specialized judges, prosecutors, investigators. So number of them are already implemented, but not throughout Georgia, so it will be also our top priority. Mandatory legal education for the investigators, introduction of personal appraiser and modern HR systems in each and every investigative agency, and I would say most importantly, general inspection reforms. We should transform general inspections into institutions which can prevent abuse of power by public officials and protect citizens, which is not the case, unfortunately, today. Independent and effective prosecution comes next. Just briefly, when we speak about independence of this particular institution, we don't only mean the independence of the general prosecutor, which is often the case right now, because we think that we should change not only the election procedure of the general prosecutor and elect him or her based on the political consensus, but also we should reform prosecutorial council, because prosecutorial council is almost the same for the prosecutor's office as the High Council of Justice for the judiciary. So if we don't reform prosecutorial council, there is no independent system of the prosecution. I'm not going to go into the details. Later we will share the presentation, just saving your time. There are a number of very detailed initiatives to ensure that truly independent line prosecutors are elected among those 15 members who later elect independent general prosecutor. Introduction of the guidelines which can prevent corruption within the prosecution system and also ensure the independence of the line prosecutors, and functional accountability and parliamentary oversight. Here we think we should also increase the role of the opposition. Unfortunately, within last 4 or 5 years, if I'm not wrong, Parliament has never heard the report of the Prosecutor General, which is a violation of the rules of procedure of the Parliament. So these are also initiatives coming out of this reality. Independent investigative mechanisms. We think that there should be independent anti-corruption investigative mechanisms. I'm underlining investigative, not just anti-corruption bureau without investigative functions. And there should be also specialization along this entire judicial chain, which is the recommendation of the European Union and which is among those 9 priorities. Ensuring real independence of Special Investigation Service. You know, it's a successor of the State Inspector's Service. We have a number of detailed initiatives here. What should be the mandate, how we should expand the mandate to add other so-called white-collar crimes, abuse of power by public officials, and to remove those crimes from the mandate which is not relevant. For example, crimes against journalists, which were added to their mandate, and it distracts them from their primary mandate to investigate torture, inhuman and degrading treatment. And ensuring constitutional status. If this institution would have a constitutional status, it would be really difficult for the government to abolish it back in 2021. I'm going to elaborate more later on this anti-corruption independent mechanism. Independent and effective judiciary. Here we have a very clear message. We understand it's a very painful process, but there will be no compromises from our side, whether it will be a coalition government or whatever it will be the composition after 2024. So we should reach a consensus on the failed system. National and international actors should agree that previous system, which is currently right now and which was previously under the previous government, failed, and fundamental changes are needed. And here we will initiate work towards that kind of consensus, and international reliable assessment of the system should be also initiated, which we want to undertake. It's going to be a difficult task. Once again, we can't conduct those reforms within one day. It's going to be a painful procedure, but this is the only way to reach the independence of the court. We believe that there is no independence of the judiciary if we don't reform High Council of Justice fundamentally, and there are also a number of detailed initiatives here, how to make sure that we have truly independent members, judge members and non-judge members by double two-third decision-making, introduction of the rule of double two-third decision-making, and so on and so on. Also, we are very much supporting vetting procedure, not to all judges, but at the initial stage at least to the Supreme Court judges, to the High Council of Justice, and to the chairs of the court, because we can't collapse the system, but these are important positions from where we should start. Fighting corruption in the judiciary, and we believe that if we create that kind of independent mechanism, which I mentioned, this institution will be effectively deal with corruption cases in the judiciary. Criminal justice policy, which is also our key messages. And by the way, when speaking about the messages, I would like, on behalf of the party, to thank IRI, which was helping. John is here, and they were helping a lot to deliver those messages for the public, very clear messages and understandable for the public. Here we have a very different approach from GD and from the previous government, UNEP. We neither support zero tolerance policy nor support extremely liberal approach towards all type of crimes. We say yes to just order and evidence-based criminal justice policy in line with criminogenic situation. That's a very difficult task. That's a lot of reforms to be implemented to reach that goal. I'm not going to go to the details, but our big idea here will be moving from the punitive policy to the prevention policy, which has never been the case in Georgia before. It was only punishment, punishment, and punishment, never prevention. So we would like to move on the prevention in the future. No to political retaliation and vendetta. This is our key message. You know the situation, political situation in Georgia. Over time, this has been always hindering the development of the justice system and development of the country for over years. So this will be our key message. We are right now working on the details, how to make the legislation in reliance and what kind of drafts to present. But that's our key message. And the introduction of the victim-oriented approach, which also has never been the case before. I'm not going to talk much on the unified evidence-based criminal justice policy, but key message here is that each and every decisions that we will be making in the future will be based on the analysis and will be based on the close cooperation of different state agencies when it comes to implementation of the criminal justice policy in the practice. And first and foremost, reform of the crime registration system, which we have started back in 2018, and it has always been a problem, you know, the manipulation with the statistics and this kind of issues which we want to eradicate. And here are some steps to be taken in this regard. Anti-drug policy, which is our key message, and it's quite I would say challenging in this moment right now, because a lot of people are dying, especially in the center of Tbilisi, in the Tbilisi clubs. So we have fragmented approach here, differentiated, I would say. We have quite a strict policy towards drug dealers, differentiated sanctions for purchase and possession, because it's different when it comes to severity of the crime, and assistance and care to drug addicts, which has never been the case also before. Also, legislation and policy has been quite punitive in this regard under the GD, under the previous government, and this is something new that we want to offer. Anti-corruption reform, which is quite huge, one of the main lines of our reforms. First of all, we say that elite political corruption equals to treason. This was already raised by Mr. Gaharia in our public speeches. It endangers state security, and we want to see that in light of state security and in light of violating of the human rights, especially social and economic rights. It has never been the case also before. So we think that we should remove all the functions from different state agencies as it is today, from the Ministry of Justice, from the State Security Service, from the Prosecutor's Office, and create independent anti-corruption investigative bureau, introduce specialization across entire judicial chain, specialized prosecutors, specialized judges, and bring together all anti-corruption functions, as it was recommended by EU under the 12 priorities, and as it is recommended in more details in November 8 Commission recommendations. Bringing together all anti-corruption functions and development of user-friendly channels for reporting corruption, secure channels for the whistleblowers, which we don't have currently, and this will be also part of the reform. Well, depoliticized professional public service, which will be our key priorities. Here we have identified 3 main lines, but this is not to say it's quite a broad issue, but there are 3 main lines. First of all, we want to create independent mechanisms which will be responsible for overseeing civil service appointments, promotions, disciplinary actions and dismissals, to avoid politically motivated dismissals, which has been a case for a long time and which is still the case. We want to introduce unified personal appraisal system, which is not in place right now, which can protect our civil servants from politicized dismissals. And this was our idea when we were in the government administration under when Mr. Gacharia was a prime minister, to establish a school of public servants, which unfortunately we were not able to implement, and we hope that we will have the chance in the future. Consensus-based decision, which is, I would say, baseline for our reforms, because after the elections, consensus-based decisions and coalition government will be inevitable. We have made compromises like a couple of times. Becker will later talk about those issues, but this will be key. So we think that on the positions which are key for free and fair elections, key for independent justice system, key for preventing corruptions, to elect and appoint officials based on the political consensus. And here are the lists. I know, like, government is against it. They are criticizing this kind of initiatives, but that's the only way to ensure functional checks and balances after 2024 elections especially, and that's the only way to ensure functional separation of powers. And here is the list: General Prosecutor, State Security Service Head, Head of the Special Investigation Service, Public Defender, and so on and so on. Elections. We can talk a lot about elections, but just to save your time, and we have already exchanged our plan, how we are going to protect elections, and we have created a task force within the party. You're receiving like evidence and some materials over time. Well, first of all, I know many parties have that initiative, but I wouldn't exaggerate if we say that we were the first. We are very much advocating for introduction of electronic voting for immigrants. Election of the president by direct popular vote, it was our latest initiative, and election of Central Election Commission administration based on political consensus. So going back to election of the chair by 100 votes, as it was initially, and then they have decreased it to 76, to simple majority. We are also covering under our reforms plan decentralization, which is not functional. Today we only have strategies and action plans, but not implemented in the practice. So here are also a number of issues we want to cover, that we want to make sure municipalities have the autonomy to generate and allocate their budget based on local needs and priorities, which is not the case today. We want to make sure that municipalities have the autonomy to manage healthcare facilities, services, and programs. We want to create specialized anti-corruption municipal units to tackle corruption on the local level, on the municipal level, which is not the case. Today they just simply have a green light. And we want to establish an independent oversight committee which can control the spread of corruption on the municipal and on the local level, which will be composed also by the representatives of the civil society. It will be kind of a control from the outside. And human rights. So we don't see human rights protection as like something standing alone. We don't see it separately. We want to introduce human rights-oriented approach in each and every field of governance. Unfortunately, right now it is perceived as human rights protection is standing somewhere alone. So our approach will be completely different. This is what we have started when Mr. Gheorghe was the Prime Minister. And here we have identified some priority areas where we have reached some success when we were in the police and when we were in the government administration. Well, violence, including sexual violence against women and children, domestic violence. Here we have enhancing of already existing mechanisms which are in place and introducing new mechanisms aimed at ensuring strong coordination between relevant agencies, which is a serious problem. Right now we want to introduce child-friendly environment and juvenile investigative divisions, which has started, but it's not covering entire country, so we want to cover entire country. We want to expand witness victim coordinator service throughout the country and start, I would say, functional. It has started, but it's not functional yet. It was also our initiative, and we worked together with the Ministry of Justice when we were in the government on the reform of the juvenile referral system, which is part of the prevention, crime prevention approach. We are covering also PVD rights. We are covering IDP rights with particular initiatives. It will be our top priorities. We are covering ethnic minorities and their inclusion in the decision-making, their inclusion representing in the government authorities. We are covering fight against discrimination, all types of discrimination. I did not give a list, but we are covering all types of discrimination. And one of the huge problems that we have right now is increasing number of social service staff members, which is a huge problem now. It needs some financial, budgetary resources, and we work together with Becca, who is very experienced on this issue, and that's in our agenda.